Well, one of the things you said very early is that the issue of access and information, the education being the vital component in this. I feel, however, and I will go to Attorney Lynette Seebaran-Suite in just a moment, but I want to get you to start this. I feel, however, whenever you look at a willingness to entertain the discussion of abortion, whenever you look at people having the desire to look for more information as it relates to planning family and stuff like that. The church plays a very important part in this. I always feel that that is an area. And I'm looking at a statement coming from Father Clive Harvey, who is the vicar of clergy in the Archdiocese. He says that babies who are not born healthy and who are impacted by Zika virus should not be aborted but brought into this world. He said no matter what the circumstances are, they should be brought into the world and loved even more so. Do you see that sort of message coming, working in the minds of a country that's still pretty religious, and that sort of keeps women from going out and doing, getting the information and doing the right planning, and or going into the backyard because they don't want to be shamed, as it were? I'm asking you that, Dr. Sharpe. Yes.
Um, I think that whatever women choose to do, they need to be supported in that choice. Okay. So the women who choose to continue a pregnancy where they are going, think they're going to have a child who has a disability, then the country has a responsibility to provide services to support children with disabilities. Absolutely, there's no question about it. So, do we have speech therapists working in the public sector? Do we have occupational therapists? Do we have special education services that really provide the kind of support and services that those children need? So that women who make that choice need to know that it is going to be, at the moment, be a real struggle. And that is not to say that there should not be a real struggle. It really means that the country needs to think in terms of providing for people who make both choices. If you make the choice to terminate a pregnancy, you need to have a safe termination of pregnancy. If you make a choice not to terminate a pregnancy, then you have to have the facilities that support you in looking after your child. You know, and I think that's an absolute.
Dr. Jacqueline Sharpe, I'm going to turn that question then across to the attorney, Lynette Seebaran-Suite. I make the connection between what is advocated by religion, which is that whole question of the morality, and the willingness. The reason I harp on it is because the willingness of those who are in governance to move forward will depend on satisfying their constituents, as it were. And the position taken by Father Clive Harvey is indicative of what I believe, and I am asking you to enlighten me. What I believe is one of the hurdles why legislators are reluctant to get into this area of updating what exists right now to be consistent with what you're both offering this morning.
Well, I would go so far as to say that Dr. Harvey's comments are all of a piece with generally religion's profoundly anti-woman stance. You see? So that if it is that what you are saying is that it doesn't matter what the woman's choice is, she has no say in this. She has become pregnant. The fetus has been infected with the Zika virus. She has no say. She has no choice as to whether she brings that baby, and well, leave it up to her to look after it afterwards. So I regard that as all of a piece with religion in general, and anti-woman stance, and I make no apologies for that. I want to address something that, touch a bit on the question of data and statistics as to perceptions and abortion, knowledge and perception about abortion in Trinidad and Tobago, which might give the policymakers some comfort. I don't know. The data was taken in 2005, but what the data showed was that in keeping with world trends, when you asked the general population what was their perception of abortion, 50% of respondents said they had an unfavorable perception of abortion, and 50% of respondents had either a very liberal view of abortion as a woman's choice or in certain circumstances. And this is in keeping with trends of these kinds of perception surveys all over the world, certainly in the United States of America. But what is interesting is that even with the most hardline group, which is within the 50% who said that they had an unfavorable perception of abortion, if you confronted them with an actual fact situation, for example, of a teenager who had become pregnant as a result of incest, or who had been raped, or who already had several children and just herself had health problems and so on, they responded in the survey which Aspire conducted. They responded either that they would leave the choice up to the woman, or they would recommend that the woman have a procedure. So you see, there is a hypocrisy index there. Nobody wants to be in favor of abortion. Nobody is in favor of abortion. It's a very unpleasant thing. But that's not the question. The question is whether it is a public health service, which the state has a responsibility to provide. And politicians should take comfort from the fact that people's views are not as monolithically against the procedures as you would think from looking at questionnaires and so on. And then when you ask questions as to, do you know someone who has had, you'd be surprised at the number of people who know someone, a relative, a friend, or someone within their own family who has had the procedure. Is very, very widespread.
It is 28 minutes, rather that should be 22 minutes away from 11 o'clock. My guest this morning, Attorney Lynette Seebaran-Suite, who is the chairperson of the EEOC, not speaking in that capacity, and Dr. Jacqueline Sharpe, psychiatrist and the head of the FPA, and we are trying to grapple with this issue here. Well, let's get back to what the doctor identified, and you in concurrence with that, I can clearly see that. The issue here is woman's choice, rights over her own body. Now, a lot of folks argue that a lot of men are the ones who are making decisions on what the rights of women are. We have seen an ascent of women across the world, Trinidad and Tobago being no exception. Are they more involved in the decision-making process? I mean, is this agenda something that is bringing in those who are really stakeholders in this to make the decision, or is it still in the enclave of only men, Doctor?
That's a difficult question, but women across the world are still struggling to have agency over their own body. I don't know if you read the international papers, but there was just a young woman who was fired from a job because she refused to wear high-heeled shoes, and this was in Britain. Okay, anyway, she's done a petition and she's got more than 120,000 signatures. So the British Parliament is going to have to consider her situation. But that's an aside to say that how I know I'm going to annoy Kevin Paldeo Singh now when I say the patriarchy has tried to control women's bodies. The other thing is that the French Parliament has just said, the parliamentarian said that they will no longer be quiet at the sexism that occurs. So that, yes, women still feel, and women's bodies are still controlled by the patriarchy.
You're not optimistic then that they Trinidad and Tobago, I know, I understand it is across the board and across the world, but in light of all this information, are you not seeing more enlightened men, as it were, is what I'm asking?
Well, yes, we are seeing more enlightened men, and I am, not totally pessimistic about what is happening in Trinidad, because I think women are more conscious and more aware of what, that they have agency over their bodies, or they should. And I also think that there are a lot of enlightened men. The whole family planning movement is not a movement that is dominated by women alone. It has always been a partnership between men and women. And one of the things that the International Planned Parenthood Federation has done over the years is insist that 50% of our governing bodies have to be women.
Mm-hmm.
That means that the other 50% is usually men. And that we also insist that youth are part of our things and that 25% of our governing bodies must be young people.
Not only that, it's easier to move the minds into reason than to try to cut the tree down those who already perch in the area of sexism or control of
But
the
I would like to say further that there are Caribbean organizations that are very supportive of women's rights and stuff. I don't know if you know there's a Caribbean organization called Carry Man, which is they're working specifically on issues of domestic violence that of course are related. And I think that we need to recognize that the issues of rights over women's bodies include violence against women.
Yes.
It includes issues of access to comprehensive sexuality education so that young people can know how their bodies work and therefore make good decisions about themselves. So it's really not just let's change the abortion law.
Right. Are you
Yes,
just
yes.
as optimistic
add
on that?
to,
Yes.
The rays of hope that we do have on the horizon, and this is also in terms of making a plug for what the Equal Opportunity Commission does. Because in the example that Dr. Sharpe cited of somebody who was fired because she refused to wear high heels, the Equal Opportunity Commission can entertain a complaint on the basis of the status of sex in the field of employment and provide a conciliation service to resolve that kind of problem. So we are slowly creating human rights mechanisms to protect our population from human rights abuses. We have not as yet gone the full course. The Equal Opportunity Commission is certainly on record as one of its first acts as having recommended that the LGBT community be included in the category of persons who can make complaints of discrimination under our legislation. But certainly the example that Dr. Sharpe gave, that person can find a remedy with the Equal Opportunity Commission.
I'm also encouraged. I don't know if you are by the almost immediate statement from the Prime Minister after the Minister of Health made his this is not for a discussion, that he immediately said, no, this is open for discussion. That is that should be encouraging to you, Attorney.
Well, very much so, because when one listened carefully to the Prime Minister's interview with Golda Lee Bruce, the Prime Minister clearly was of the view that the human rights bill in the Constitution protected the LGBT community from discrimination. But unfortunately, the Constitution provides a remedy which is only litigible as between the citizen and the state, whereas under the Equal Opportunity Commission legislation, as between citizen and citizen, discrimination can be litigated. The difficulty that we have is that when our legislation was passed, there was a specific limiting of the definition of sex in the definition section of our Act to exclude sexual orientation, and we have been trying since then to remedy that.